They say people ruin their lives for love. I think I ruined mine for a glance, a single, too long glance that should have meant nothing. The shop wasn't much, just a narrow space on the corner of Maple and 3rd, where I fixed film cameras for people who'd forgotten how to use them. The air always smelled like dust and metal, and in winter, the heater clicked like an old metronome. That day, she came in wearing a charcoal coat and carrying a Leica that probably cost more than my car. She placed it on the counter like it was something alive. "It's been sitting in a drawer for years," she said. Her voice was low, steady, the kind that didn't need to reach for your attention because it already had it. I thought it might still work. She didn't smile. "Not yet. Just watch me the way people do when they're trying to measure how much they can reveal." I nodded, took the camera gently, and pretended to study the lens. Truth was, I was stalling. There was something about her. Not her looks, exactly, though she was beautiful in a way that didn't need announcing. It was more that she seemed complete, like she'd already lived several lives before stepping into mine. I cleared my throat. "Looks like the shutter's jammed. It might take a few days." "That's fine," she said. "I'm in no hurry." But when she said it, I felt a quiet weight in the words, like she wasn't talking about the camera at all. She gave me her name for the ticket. Clara. Simple. Clean. A name that somehow suited her. While I wrote it down, she looked around the shop, eyes moving over the walls filled with old portraits, broken lenses, and forgotten postcards customers left behind. "You keep other people's memories here," she said softly. "Doesn't that ever get heavy?" I almost laughed, but stopped when I realized she wasn't joking. "Sometimes," I said, "but they're not mine." "That helps." She gave a small nod, not approval. Exactly, more like she understood too well. Then she reached out, brushed her fingers against a stack of old negatives. Her hands were careful, practiced. I noticed a thin gold band on her right hand. Not a wedding ring, just a ring that looked like it used to mean something. When she left, the bell over the door chimed twice. I thought that was it. Another customer, another repair. But later, when I was cleaning the lens, I caught the faintest trace of perfume, something warm, like amber and smoke. I couldn't get it out of my head. It was as if the air still held her shape. 3 days later, she came back earlier than she said she would. "Just checking in," she said, though her eyes went straight to the counter, to the camera still half disassembled. "You caught me mid-surgery," I said, smiling before I could stop myself. She smiled back this time, small, uneven, and real. "You look too young to be this careful." I wanted to ask what she meant, but before I could, the heater clanked loudly, breaking the quiet. She took that as her cue to leave. At the door, she hesitated. Not long, just enough for the light to catch her hair, for me to see that her coat had small threads coming loose at the cuffs. For a moment, she looked less like someone untouchable and more like someone tired. She said, "Don't rush it. I trust your hands." Then she was gone. I stood there for a while, holding the half-fixed Leica, feeling the warmth of her words like something I wasn't supposed to keep. I don't know why I still remember that moment. Maybe because it felt like the first second of a fire, the kind you think you can control until you realize it's already underneath your skin. And the worst part? I didn't want it to stop. She came back on a Thursday, the kind of cold day that makes sound sharper, like everything's been stripped of softness. I was closing up early when I saw her through the fogged-up window, standing just outside, hesitating before pushing the door. "Am I too late?" she asked, her voice quieter this time. I shook my head, wiping my hands on a rag. "Just in time, actually. Your camera's working again." She smiled faintly, the kind of smile that doesn't quite reach the eyes but still tries to. "You saved it then?" "Barely," I said. The light meter was corroded. "Took some patience." "That's good. I could use a little patience lately." It hung there, a line that seemed too personal for a conversation about cameras. I looked up, and for the first time, she didn't look entirely composed. There was something in her eyes, exhaustion, maybe, or a memory she was trying to keep from surfacing. I gestured to the stool beside the counter. "You can test it if you want. There's good light by the window." She hesitated, then sat. Her movements were graceful, deliberate. The window light hit her hair, and I noticed silver strands woven through the darker ones. Not hidden, just there, unapologetic. "Sorry," she murmured. "Habit." "No problem," I said, though my pulse was running faster than it should have. She wound the film slowly, avoiding eye contact. "My husband used to hate cameras," she said. Her gaze met mine, steady but unreadable. for being careful." Then she turned and walked out, her reflection sliding across the glass door before disappearing into the gray streetlight. I stayed there, the warmth of her touch still caught between my fingers, like static that wouldn't fade. And for the first time, I wondered if I'd just crossed a line I hadn't even seen until it was too late. It started raining that evening. Not the clean kind of rain that washes everything away, but the stubborn kind that clings to the air and seeps through your sleeves. I'd stayed late, sorting through a box of broken lenses when the doorbell chimed softly. Clara stood there, damp at the edges, coat darkened by the storm. "Sorry," she said, breathless. "I was nearby and saw the light. Didn't think you'd still be open." I wasn't technically, but I found myself saying, "Come in, you'll catch cold." She hesitated, then stepped inside. Her hair was slightly undone, not the composed version I'd seen before. I offered her a towel from the back room. She accepted it without the usual polite deflection, rubbing the rain from her hands. "I didn't mean to bother you," she said. The light was warm. Everything else felt too quiet. There it was again, the small cracks she didn't mean to show. I poured her some tea from the old kettle I kept for myself, and she accepted it with both hands, holding the cup close to her face. The steam blurred her expression, softening her features. We sat at the counter. Outside, the rain hit the glass like a soft drumbeat. She broke the silence first. "I went through the photos you fixed for me." "Oh, there was one I didn't take. Of a window. It's mine, but I didn't shoot it. My husband must have used the camera before it broke." She looked down. "He never told me he'd used it. Strange what survives, isn't it?" Her voice trembled at the edges, not from cold, but from something older, heavier. I wanted to say something, to comfort her, but I didn't know how. So I just listened. She smiled faintly, but her eyes stayed on her tea. "You remind me of him, a little." That made my stomach twist. "How so?" "You're careful with broken things." She looked up then, and for a heartbeat, neither of us looked away. The shop was too quiet. The heater had stopped, leaving only the sound of rain and her breathing. I could see the faint pulse at her throat. She set down her cup, her fingers brushing mine again, not by accident this time. I didn't move. She leaned forward slightly, her voice barely audible. "Sometimes I forget what it's like to be seen without someone asking for something in return." My throat went dry. I wanted to tell her that I didn't want anything from her, not the way others might. I just wanted her to stay, to keep talking, to let me be the person she didn't have to hide from. But I didn't say any of it. Then her phone buzzed on the counter. A name flashed across the screen, David. She froze. The moment broke. "I should go," she said quickly, fumbling for her coat. Her hands shook again, this time not from the cold. I stood, wanting to stop her, but I didn't. I just handed her umbrella back, my fingers brushing hers for a fraction of a second. She didn't look at me when she said, "Good night." When the door closed behind her, the rain seemed louder somehow. I stood there in the dim shop, her half-finished tea still steaming faintly, the echo of her almost touch still humming through me. And for the first time, I realized how easily something small, a look, a pause, a bit of warmth, could start to feel like gravity, and how close I'd come to falling. She didn't come by for a week. I told myself I didn't notice, that the quiet was nice. But every time the doorbell didn't ring, I heard it anyway, that small, phantom sound of what I wanted to happen. Then, one late afternoon, she walked in. No rain this time, just gray light and the kind of stillness that felt premeditated. "You're closed," she said softly. "I can stay open," I said, before I could stop myself. She looked at me for a long second, then stepped inside and locked the door behind her. The click of the latch sounded final, like a confession neither of us had rehearsed. "I shouldn't be here," she said, but I didn't know where else to go. Her voice was calm, but something underneath it was unraveling. I tried to meet her eyes, but she was studying the counter instead, the same spot where her fingers had brushed mine before. "You can sit," I said quietly. She did. Her coat slipped from her shoulders, and for once, she didn't fix it. She looked tired, not in the ordinary way, but like she was done holding herself together. For a while, neither of us spoke. The air between us felt charged, like static right before lightning strikes. "Finally," she said, "you keep looking at me like you're waiting for something to happen." I didn't know what to say. My pulse was too loud. She continued, barely above a whisper. "I don't know what this is. You're kind. You listen. And maybe that's all I need right now. But you look at me like you think it means more. I tried to speak, to say no, or yes, or anything that sounded sane. But what came out was just, it feels like something's already happened. Her eyes lifted then, and it hit me. The same quiet sadness I'd seen before, only deeper now. Do you want it to? She asked. The words should have been simple, but they weren't. They hung between us, heavy and trembling. I could feel my hands wanting to reach for hers, my body leaning forward a fraction too far. But she pulled back slightly, as if even air could be dangerous. I'm not supposed to want this, she said, and then shook her head, almost laughing. God, listen to me. I sound like someone twice my age. You don't, I said gently. You sound like someone who's trying not to fall apart. That made her go still. Eli, she said finally, my name, soft and deliberate. I don't want to hurt you. And I think that's exactly what I'll do. We just stared at each other then. No noise from the street. No heater ticking. Just the small space between us, carrying every word we hadn't said. She stood first, reached for her coat, didn't look back. At the door, she paused, hand on the handle. You should forget me, she said, voice unsteady. And then, almost too quietly to hear, because I already tried and failed. I didn't see her again for almost a month. I told myself that was a good thing. Distance, air, clarity. But habits form fast, and missing someone you never really had is a strange kind of hunger. Then one afternoon, I found an envelope slipped under the shop door. My name, written in her handwriting, careful, looping, unmistakable. Inside was a small photograph, grainy, black and white. A man and a woman, standing in front of a lake. Her hair was shorter then, her smile less practiced. The man's arm was around her, but her eyes were the same as now. Watching something else. Someone else. There was a note. You said it felt like something had already happened. Maybe it did, years ago. Maybe that's why I keep showing up. No signature. Just that. I stared at it for too long. My hands were shaking before I even realized it. The words weren't romantic. They were something heavier. A confession shaped like surrender. That night, I closed the shop early. I walked aimlessly until I found myself in front of the old art museum, where she'd mentioned she sometimes worked restoring paintings. Through the glass, I saw her, bent over a canvas under soft lamplight. Alone. I almost left, but she looked up suddenly, as if she'd felt me. She opened the door herself, expression unreadable. You got it. I nodded, holding the photo out. Why did you send it? She exhaled, leaning against the doorway. Because you reminded me of him. The words landed like a quiet explosion. My husband, she said after a moment. The man in the photo. He died 5 years ago. He was good, gentle, but by the end, he barely spoke to me. I used to stand in the same room and feel invisible. Then you. She broke off, pressing her fingers to her temple. You started looking at me like I used to hope you would. I didn't know what to say. My chest felt too tight for words. I don't want to use you as a mirror, she continued softly. That's not fair. But sometimes I think we find people just to see if we're still capable of feeling at all. Rain had started again, light this time, tapping against the windows. The air smelled of paint thinner and something floral, faint but familiar. I stepped closer, just enough for her to notice, but not enough to cross the line she'd drawn. You're not using me, I said quietly. I'm here. That's all. She looked up then, and something in her face shifted, not relief, not affection exactly, but recognition. You shouldn't wait for me to heal, she whispered. Some of us don't. The silence that followed wasn't empty. It pulsed, alive, full of everything neither of us could name. Then she took the photo back, folded it once, and placed it in my hand. Keep it, she said. Maybe you'll see what I couldn't. And when she turned away, I realized she wasn't pushing me out of her life. She was letting me in the only way she knew how. Through something already broken. She came to the shop one evening after closing. No pretense this time. No broken camera in her hands. Just her, standing in the doorway, rain in her hair, eyes that looked like they'd made peace with losing something. I didn't want to end like that, she said. Neither did I. I turned the sign to closed and waited, the air thick with everything unsaid. She didn't move closer right away. She looked around, at the shelves, the photographs, the bits of half-fixed history, and smiled faintly. You live inside broken things, she said softly. I think that's what I liked first about you. I laughed quietly. And you? You fix them. Sometimes. She met my eyes. Not always. She walked over, slow, deliberate. Every step felt heavier than the last, as if she was carrying something invisible between us. When she finally stopped in front of me, she didn't speak. She just looked, really looked, the way you do when you're memorizing something you know you might lose again. I thought I was done feeling this way, she said, almost to herself. The wanting, the guilt that follows it. I told myself those doors were closed. You can open them again, I said quietly. She shook her head. You don't understand. When you reach a certain age, you stop believing in beginnings. You start making peace with what's left. Her voice cracked a little at the end. It undid me. I don't want to be a beginning, I said. Or a reminder. I just want to be real, whatever that means to you. Something in her softened then. The tension in her shoulders loosened. She took a slow breath, and for once, didn't try to fill the silence. I stepped closer, not enough to touch, just enough to share the same space, the same uneven rhythm of breathing. Her eyes glistened, but she didn't look away. Eli, I know, I said. The rain outside picked up, tapping against the glass like it was keeping time with us. She reached up, hesitated, then let her hand rest against my cheek. It was a small touch, brief, trembling, but it felt like a lifetime folding in on itself. I can't promise this makes sense, she whispered. It doesn't have to, I said. It just has to be true. Her forehead touched mine then. Not a kiss, not even quite a lean. Just stillness. The kind that carries both an ending and a beginning in the same breath. For a long time, we stayed that way. Eyes closed, breathing each other's air, the world shrinking to the hum of the old heater and the smell of rain-soaked air. She finally pulled back, eyes soft but certain. You'll be okay, she said. So will you. She smiled, that small, unguarded one I'd only seen once before, and nodded. Maybe that's enough. When she left, she didn't look back this time. She didn't have to. Because for once, the silence she left behind didn't feel empty. It felt like the truth. It's been almost 2 years since the last time I saw her. Sometimes I still catch myself expecting the bell above the shop door to ring. That small, familiar sound that used to split the air like a quiet promise. It doesn't. But I still look up anyway. The world moved on. The shop's the same, mostly. I still fix things. Cameras, lenses, moments people are trying to preserve. But I see them differently now. Before Clara, I thought restoring something meant returning it to how it used to be. Now I know, you can't. You can only make it hold again, cracks and all. She taught me that without meaning to. We didn't fall in love the way movies pretend people do. There were no grand gestures, no music swelling under the weight of our choices. What happened between us was smaller, quieter. It was the kind of love that fits into pauses, glances, the space between two people trying not to cross a line they already have in their hearts. And yet, it changed everything. I stopped mistaking silence for safety. I started listening to what people don't say. I learned that love isn't always about staying. Sometimes it's about allowing someone to walk away without taking the warmth with them. She wrote once, months after she left, a short letter, no return address. It said, I hope you're still careful with broken things. I am too, finally. That was it. No explanation. No goodbye. Just proof that healing doesn't always look like reunion. Sometimes it's a quiet recognition that you were both fire and shelter to each other, even if only for a while. I still have the photograph she gave me, the one of her and her husband by the lake. I restored it properly this time, adjusted the exposure. When the light hits it just right, her eyes don't look lost anymore. People ask why I never framed it. I tell them it's because some memories don't belong on walls. They live better in drawers, close enough to find but far enough not to haunt you. Every so often, I take it out and remember how it felt that night. The rain, her hand on my face, the way the silence between us said everything words couldn't carry. I used to think I played with fire and burned my world down. Now I think maybe I just lit it up long enough to see who I really was. And maybe that's all love is. Not forever, not perfect, just true for the time it's allowed to exist. If this story made you feel something, let me know in the comments. Would you want more stories like this?